The sun hung low over the jagged horizon, burning the desert sky with streaks of crimson and gold. Shadows stretched across the cracked earth, twisting like restless spirits. In the distance, the silhouettes of towering mesas loomed, silent witnesses to the land's harsh trials. Here, the wind carried whispers of old battles, of warriors who had walked the sand long before the first white man crossed the plains. Among these whispers came the name of Cale Redhawk, a young Apache whose courage was already spoken of in hushed tones along the rivers and canyons. Yet none truly knew the depths of the fire that burned inside him. Cale stood at the edge of a narrow cliff, his eyes fixed on the distant encampment where torches flickered against the approaching dusk. Smoke curled up in spirals, carrying with it the scent of pine and charred wood. His heart beat like a war drum as he traced the path ahead, where men with faces painted in fearsome patterns gathered, preparing for what they called the trial by fire. It was a ritual none had survived in living memory, a test meant to break the spirit of those who dared to defy the law of the settlers. Yet Cale had never known fear the way others did. Where others saw flames, he saw paths. Where others saw chains, he saw freedom. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair tied back in a braid that swung with each deliberate step. He was Draven Stormclaw, Cale's mentor and protector. A veteran of countless skirmishes along the borderlands, Draven's gaze was sharp, cutting through the darkness as easily as his blade could slice through steel. "Cale," he said, his voice low but steady, carrying the weight of years spent on the frontier. "Tonight is no ordinary challenge. These men do not fight with honor. They fight with fire, and fire can consume everything, even the strongest of hearts." Cale's hand rested on the hilt of his bow, the leather worn smooth by countless hours of practice and countless battles fought for survival. "I have faced fire before," he said, voice firm, eyes glowing with determination. "And I will face it again." There was no arrogance in his words, only the quiet certainty of someone who had lived each day, knowing the land could take everything and give nothing. As the wind picked up, carrying the distant cries of coyotes and the metallic clang of men sharpening blades, Cale's mind drifted to the people he protected, the families who depended on the Apache to guard them, against the relentless encroachment of settlers and raiders alike. Among them was Leora Blackfeather, a healer whose knowledge of herbs and medicine was said to rival even the oldest shamans. Her hands had mended Cale's wounds more than once, and her presence was a calm in the storm that raged within him. But tonight, she would watch from the shadows, powerless to intervene should the trial consume him entirely. The camp below was alive with movement, torches flickering across the dirt in chaotic patterns. Men shouted orders, their boots stirring up clouds of dust, while others carried wooden frames lined with kindling, preparing the very fires that would test Cale's spirit. There was a brutality here, a calculated cruelty meant to remind all who watched that defiance carried a price. And yet, as Cale surveyed the scene, he saw not just menace, but opportunity. In every flicker of flame he saw a path forward, a chance to prove that courage could bend even the harshest rules of men. Draven stepped closer, resting a hand on Cale's shoulder. "Remember this, boy," he said, eyes narrowing. "Strength alone will not save you. The fire will test your heart, your mind, everything you are. You must move with it, not against it. Let the flame speak, and you may yet walk away." Cale nodded, though inside, his pulse raced with anticipation rather than fear. The desert had taught him lessons no school ever could: patience, endurance, the wisdom of silence. And now those lessons would be tested in a way no battle ever had. The first torches were lit, their flames dancing like wild serpents against the twilight. The sound of crackling fire echoed through the canyon walls, a harsh, relentless rhythm that matched Cale's heartbeat. From a distance, the voices of the elders could be heard, chanting a warning to all who would step into the fire. It was a song older than any living memory, a dirge meant to remind challengers of their mortality. But Cale did not tremble. His eyes locked on the path, tracing the course of each flame as though mapping the land itself. Suddenly, a horn sounded, long and mournful, shaking the stillness of the desert. From every corner of the encampment, men stepped forward, their faces grim, their bodies hardened by a lifetime of surviving under harsh suns and harsher men. Cale felt the weight of their gaze, felt the silent judgment passing over him like a storm cloud. And yet in that moment, he felt more alive than ever. The fire was no longer just a test, it was a calling, and he would answer it, whatever the cost. A figure emerged from the circle of torches, tall and imposing. His armor glinted in the firelight, a reflection of countless battles fought and won. This was Garrick Ironhand, the man who had designed the trial by fire, a commander whose name was whispered in fear across the frontier. He stepped forward, raising a hand to signal the beginning of the challenge. Every eye turned to Cale, the boy who dared to defy tradition, who dared to face the flames when all others had fled. Cale's fingers tightened on his bow, muscles coiled, ready for the moment that would define him. The flames licked the air, hungrily, threatening to consume everything in their path. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if the land itself was aware that something extraordinary was about to unfold. And in that charged silence, Cale felt it, a fire not of wood or oil, but of destiny, burning within him. As the first torch was thrown into the center of the arena, igniting a circle of searing heat, Cale stepped forward. His eyes never left the fire, his mind focused, his heart steady. Around him, the whispers grew louder, the stories of past challengers, of those who had entered the flames and never returned. But Cale did not hear them. In his mind, there was only the path ahead, the fire that awaited, and the promise he had made to himself, that no blaze, no matter how fierce, would ever define him. Then, as if sensing his resolve, the wind shifted. Flames danced higher, shadows stretched longer, and the ground beneath him seemed to hum with tension. Cale knew in that instant that this trial was unlike any he had faced. Every instinct, every lesson learned in the harsh desert nights would be tested once, and yet a part of him welcomed it. For Cale Redhawk did not fear fire. He feared only the loss of the freedom he had fought so hard to protect. A sudden crack split the night as a torch fell near his feet, sparks flying in every direction. The crowd gasped. Cale's breath hitched for only a moment before he leaped forward, moving with a grace and precision that surprised even those who had known him since childhood. The fire surged around him, wild and unpredictable, yet he pressed on, each step a declaration that he would not be broken. And then, as the flames roared higher, a shadow moved in the crowd. Cale caught a glimpse of it, something he did not expect, a figure cloaked in black, eyes gleaming with a knowledge he could not yet understand. Their gaze met, and in that instant, he knew that the trial by fire was only the beginning. Something far more dangerous awaited him beyond the flames, something that would test not only his courage, but the very essence of who he was. Cale paused, heart hammering, every nerve alert. The fire roared, the crowd held its breath, and the desert seemed to lean in closer. The first trial had begun, but the real battle one that would shape the destiny of Cale, Redhawk, and the land he fought to protect was still waiting, hidden just beyond the light of the torches. And in that moment, standing at the edge of fire and fate, Cale felt it fully. The story of a lifetime was about to be written, and he alone would walk the line between destruction and triumph. The fire crackled louder, sending sparks high into the night sky, and Cale Redhawk's eyes never wavered. Each flicker revealed more of the arena, the wooden frames, the torches, the circle of men who had come to witness the destruction of those brave or foolish enough to challenge the trial by fire. But Cale's mind wandered beyond the immediate danger. To the land he called home, to the stories buried in the canyons and rivers of the desert, and to the ancestors whose courage had flowed through his veins since birth. Long before the settlers arrived, the Apache had roamed these lands with a freedom that few outsiders could understand. Every cliff, every ravine, every dry riverbed had a story etched into it. Cale had grown up hearing tales of warriors whose names were whispered like legends: Ironhawk, Swift Bear, and Thunder Voice. These were men who had faced far worse than any fire, who had survived storms, raids, and hunger, yet carried the honor of their people with pride. Cale's father, Ashen Redhawk, had been one of them, strong, wise, and feared by enemies, but beloved by his people. Ashen had taught Cale the art of patience, how to read the desert winds, and how to move like a shadow when danger loomed. But he had also warned him that courage alone was never enough. The heart must be tempered like steel, and the mind sharp as a blade. Cale felt that legacy now pressing down upon him as he moved through the flames. Each step was deliberate, measured, a dance between life and death. He remembered the nights he had spent on the cliffs above the river, practicing with his bow, listening to the whispers of the desert wind. Those hours of solitude had taught him more than any battle ever could, the way fire consumed, the way it demanded respect, and the way fear could be transformed into power if one understood it. Yet the trial by fire was unlike anything Cale had imagined. This was no simple test of skill or endurance. The torches were not just symbols, they were warnings. Every ember that rose into the night sky carried the weight of previous challengers who had failed, their screams long since silenced, their spirits rumored to linger in the smoke. Cale felt their presence, a chilling reminder that survival was not guaranteed, no matter how skilled or courageous a warrior might be. From the shadows, Draven Stormclaw's eyes followed Cale's every move. The mentor had survived countless battles across the borderlands, yet even he did not fully understand the cruelty that had been designed into this trial. He had seen men broken by fire, not because of its heat, but because it exposed the weaknesses in their hearts, the fears they refused to face. He had trained Cale for this moment. Yet even he wondered if the boy's spirit could withstand the full measure of what lay ahead. Cale's attention shifted as a sudden sound pierced the night, the metallic clang of boots striking the stone floor, followed by the low hum of whispers from the crowd. Eyes turned, and Cale caught sight of the cloaked figure he had glimpsed earlier. The black-cloaked stranger moved with purpose, weaving through the crowd with an unnatural ease, as if the shadows themselves obeyed their command. Cale felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something more to this figure, something dangerous, something that even fire might not reveal. He tried to focus on the trial, on the torches, on the circle of men who had come to watch him burn. But the presence of the stranger stirred a tension he could not ignore. Were they, and why had they come? The desert had taught Cale that every shadow had meaning, that every movement carried intent, and this figure's intent was unreadable, like a puzzle with missing pieces. As he moved deeper into the arena, the flames licked higher, their heat pressing against his skin. Cale felt a memory rise unbidden of the day he had first learned the language of fire. His father had led him to a small clearing where a single torch burned in the wind. "Watch the flame, Cale," Ashen had said. "It shows you truth. Fear is only a shadow cast by what you do not understand. Learn its ways, and it will never control you." Cale had memorized every flicker, every movement of that flame. He had understood then that fire was both destroyer and teacher, a force that demanded respect but could never truly harm one who knew its language. But this trial was different. This fire was not natural. It was designed to intimidate, to break, to consume. The men who had built it had no regard for tradition, for honor, for the respect that fire demanded. Cale could feel the malice in the flames, a hatred that seemed almost human in its intensity. It hissed at him, threatened him, dared him to step back. And Cale stepped forward instead, letting the heat sharpen his focus, letting the danger heighten his senses. In the crowd, whispers grew louder. Some spoke of Cale's family, of the Red Hawks, who had resisted settlers and raiders alike for generations. Others spoke of the trial by fire itself, of the dozens who had failed before him, leaving only ashes and regret. Cale ignored the voices, though he felt their weight pressing against him. The desert had taught him to move through noise and distraction, to see what others could not. And now he saw the patterns of the fire, the weaknesses in the circle of men, the opportunities hidden in plain sight. Draven's voice broke through his thoughts, low but sharp. "Do not underestimate them, Cale. The fire is only the beginning. Watch their eyes. Watch their hands. There is danger here beyond the flames." Cale nodded, muscles tensing, every sense alive. He could feel that the trial was not merely a physical test. It was a battle of wits, of instinct, of spirit. And somewhere beyond the fire, hidden in the crowd or the shadows, the black-cloaked figure waited, an unknown threat that could tip the balance at any moment. The first wave of fire surged higher, and Cale leaped, rolling past a wall of flames with a grace born of countless hours of training. Sparks rained around him, scorching the sand, yet he moved as if the fire were water, flowing around him, not against him. The crowd gasped, and a few men shouted in disbelief. None had expected him to move with such precision, such calm. Cale's heart beat steadily, each pulse a drumbeat of defiance. And then, as he cleared the first obstacle, he felt a subtle shift in the desert wind, a whisper of movement behind the torches. The black-cloaked figure had changed position, closing in with a speed that seemed impossible. Cale's instincts flared. His hand went to his dagger, a small but deadly weapon his father had given him, its edge honed to perfection. He could not yet see the figure clearly, but he felt their presence like a weight pressing against his shoulder. In that moment, Cale understood something vital. The trial by fire was not just about surviving flames. It was about recognizing danger in every form, about seeing the unseen, about trusting instincts that went beyond sight and sound. He had been trained for battles against men, against nature, against despair. But this was a new test, one that required every lesson he had learned and every skill he had yet to discover. The fire roared again, higher, hotter, as the second wave of torches ignited the dry wood that lined the arena. Cale moved, leaping, dodging, rolling, the heat pressing against him like a living thing. Sparks struck the leather of his armor, but he did not falter. Each movement was deliberate, a statement of intent. He would not be broken. Not by fire, not by fear, not by whatever force lurked in the shadows. And still, the black-cloaked figure followed, silent, calculating, a presence that seemed to grow with every step. Cale could feel the weight of history around him, the ancestors who had walked these lands, the warriors who had fought and fallen, the spirits of the desert that had whispered warnings and guidance. They were with him, he realized, lending strength he did not yet fully understand. He reached the center of the arena where the flames burned brightest. The heat was intense, almost unbearable, yet Cale's mind remained clear. He knew that the trial by fire was testing more than his body. It was testing his resolve, his courage, his ability to remain unbroken in the face of chaos. And somewhere beyond the flames, beyond the crowd, beyond the shadows, the real challenge waited, one that no training, no skill, no courage could fully prepare him for. Cale's eyes scanned the arena, seeking patterns, looking for weakness, searching for the faintest sign of movement. He caught a glint of metal, the reflection of a torch in the black figure's eyes. Their gaze met again, and this time Cale felt it fully. The trial was no longer about fire, it was about a confrontation he could not yet see, a threat that could strike at any moment. A mystery that would define his destiny if he survived. The desert wind shifted again, carrying the scent of smoke and the faintest trace of something metallic, something foreign. Cale's instincts screamed at him, warning him of danger, but he did not hesitate. He moved with the fire, letting it guide him, let it teach him. The crowd watched, breathless, as he danced between the flames, a figure of determination and defiance. And in the shadows beyond the torches, the black-cloaked figure smiled. The trial had begun, yes. But the real game, the one that would test Cale Redhawk in ways he could not yet imagine, was only beginning. Cale Redhawk's breath came in controlled bursts, each inhale drawing in the scent of smoke and scorched sand, each exhale a quiet promise that he would not falter. The flames roared around him, yet it was not the fire that held him most captive, it was the black-cloaked figure. His presence weighed heavier than the heat, whose every movement was precise, calculated, and impossible to predict. Cale sensed that this stranger was no ordinary adversary. They had come for more than spectacle, more than observation. There was a purpose buried beneath the shadows, one he could not yet discern. From the circle of torches, Garrick Ironhand watched with a satisfaction that was both cruel and deliberate. He had built the trial by fire to test strength, courage, and cunning, yet something about Cale unsettled him. Most challengers succumbed quickly, driven to panic by the flames. Cale moved like water around obstacles, precise, composed, unyielding. There was a fire in his eyes that Garrick had rarely seen in a mortal. He leaned forward, whispering to the men beside him, "This boy may prove more dangerous than we anticipated. Keep your eyes open. Nothing in this trial is left to chance." Cale's mind was elsewhere, tracing paths, calculating distances, listening to the rhythm of the fire. Each crackle, each hiss, told him where the flames were weakest, where the heat might shift, where he could maneuver. And yet, beneath all of this, the shadow of the black-cloaked figure lingered. Cale could feel it at his periphery, a presence that moved not with sound, but with intent. He had faced raiders, wild animals, the harsh desert, yet this was something entirely different. Meanwhile, beyond the arena, Leora Blackfeather paced the edge of the canyon, her heart heavy with anxiety. She had healed many wounds, yet the thought of Cale facing such fire, such cruelty, twisted her insides. She had always known the boy was destined for more than the quiet life of their people, yet seeing him now poised between life and death just made the truth painfully clear. Leora had discovered something the elders had not: whispers of a greater threat lurking in the land, a force that had followed Cale's family for generations. And somehow, she sensed that the black-cloaked figure was a part of it, a harbinger of dangers yet unseen. In the arena, Cale noticed subtle shifts in the patterns of the torches. Some burned brighter than others, throwing sparks that leapt higher, almost as if alive. He adjusted his movements, rolling past one blaze only to find another rising in a place he had thought safe. The crowd murmured, excitement and fear mingling as Cale continued his dance with danger. Yet in the corner of his vision he caught the glint of the black figure's eyes once more. They were too focused, too deliberate, a predator watching a prey, testing limits, probing weaknesses. Cale's pulse quickened not with fear, but with awareness, knew that the trial had layers he had not yet uncovered. Draven Stormclaw observed from the edge, hand resting on the hilt of his blade. He had trained Cale to read fire, to anticipate danger, yet even he felt unease creep through his veteran instincts. There was more at play here than a mere test of skill. The way the black-cloaked figure moved, the way the flames seemed to respond to their presence, suggested a force Cale had not been prepared for. Draven clenched his jaw, silently urging Cale to remain alert, to trust the lessons of the desert and his bloodline. Cale leaped over a fallen torch, narrowly avoiding a flare that could have singed his hair. Sparks rained down like a storm of embers, yet he moved forward without hesitation. Every step was a decision, every movement a declaration that he would not yield. But even as he pressed on, fragments of memory returned of nights spent training with Ashen Redhawk, stories about ancient warriors who had defied impossible odds, of lessons in patience, observation, and instinct. Cale drew upon these memories like armor, each thought reinforcing his determination. Suddenly, the black-cloaked figure moved with startling speed. Emerging from the shadows of the crowd and Cale's instincts screamed, the figure tossed a small bundle into the arena. It landed at his feet, and Cale's eyes widened as he realized it was a trap, a test within the test. Flames from nearby torches surged toward it, as if drawn by some unseen force. Cale's mind raced. He could dodge the fire, but the bundle, whatever it contained, was a distraction. He had to choose: advance or investigate, action or caution. Cale's hands moved almost instinctively, snatching the bundle just as a wall of flame threatened to engulf it. Inside was a map, sketched in charcoal on worn parchment, showed a network of paths through the desert, hidden ravines and secret waterholes. But there were strange markings, symbols Cale did not recognize, patterns that hinted at traps, ambushes, or worse. The black-cloaked figure's purpose was becoming clearer. They were not just an observer, they were a guide, a provocateur, a challenge in themselves. Cale knew that deciphering this map would be as dangerous as navigating the flames around him. In the crowd, whispers turned to hushed conversations. Some men recognized the markings, claiming they belonged to a long-lost clan known for their mastery of stealth and cunning. Others speculated that the black-cloaked figure had personal ties to Cale's family, though none dared speak such words aloud. The desert had long been a place of secrets, of feuds buried beneath sand and stone. And it seemed Cale had stumbled into a conflict far older than the trial by fire itself. Leora's gaze never left the arena. She sensed the layers of danger that Cale could not yet see. The way the fire was only one element of a greater puzzle. She remembered stories told in whispers by her grandmother, tales of warriors who had faced enemies not just of flesh and blood, but of cunning and deceit. Somehow she knew that the black-cloaked figure was tied to these ancient tales, a piece of a history Cale had yet to uncover. And yet she could do nothing but watch, hope, and pray that the boy she had always known could navigate not just fire, but treachery. Cale adjusted the map in his grip, eyes scanning the arena. He realized that every torch, every obstacle, every movement of the crowd could be a clue. The flames were alive with intent, the black figure moving with deliberate calculation, and the entire trial was a web designed to test mind, body, and spirit. Cale understood in that instant that survival meant more than speed or strength. It required insight, the ability to anticipate moves not yet made, and the courage to confront dangers he could not fully see. Draven shifted closer, whispering under his breath, "Remember, Kale? The fire is only the surface. Watch the shadows, read the signs, and trust your instincts. Not be drawn into their game blindly. There is more here than you know." Kale nodded, muscles tensing as he prepared for the next wave of danger. The flames leapt higher, responding as if aware of his growing understanding, and he realized that the trial by fire was not just a test, it was a conversation. The fire spoke in movements and heat, the black-cloaked figure in shadows and symbols, and Kale had to respond with precision, courage, and cunning. A sudden scream cut through the air, followed by a crash as a torch toppled near the edge of the arena.
Ow.
The crowd gasped, some stepping back in fear, others leaning forward in anticipation. Kale's eyes darted to the source and saw a younger challenger, one unprepared for the complexity of the trial, faltering in the flames. The sight made Kale's pulse quicken, not from fear, but from clarity. He could see the stakes now. Every movement, every decision, carried consequence not just for himself, but for those around him. The black-cloaked figure moved closer, eyes gleaming beneath the hood. Kale's instincts flared. He realized that the next phase of the trial would not come from fire, but from confrontation. The figure tossed another object into the arena this time, a weapon, sharp and deadly. Kale's gaze met theirs, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow. He knew that beyond this fire lay challenges that tested not just his courage, but his wisdom, his judgment, and the very essence of his spirit. He caught the weapon, its weight familiar, yet dangerous, and adjusted his stance. The flames danced around him, casting long shadows, hiding threats, revealing others. Every eye in the crowd followed his movements, the tension palpable. And somewhere beyond the torches, in the darkened edges of the desert, Kale felt the first stirrings of a realization. This trial was more than a challenge, more than a test of fire. It was a revelation, a story unfolding, and he was both protagonist and participant in a conflict whose depths he had only begun to understand. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the heat, sensing the shadows, listening to the whisper of the desert wind. The trial by fire was far from over, and the black, cloaked figure remained a mystery, their motives unreadable, their presence a constant threat. Yet Kale felt no fear. The flames, the shadows, the crowd, even the looming figure, they were all part of a puzzle he was determined to solve. The fire might test his body, but it was the mind, the heart, and the instincts of Kale Redhawk that would define the outcome. And in that charged silence, as the crowd held its breath and the desert seemed to lean closer, Kale understood one thing with absolute clarity. The trial by fire had only just begun. And the true conflict, the one that would test every fiber of his being, was still waiting. Hidden in shadow and flame, ready to strike when least expected, Kale Redhawk's eyes never left the black-cloaked figure. Every movement they made was deliberate. Every gesture, a challenge, a test, a provocation. The fire roared around him, hotter now, more unpredictable, as if it sensed his focus and sought to break it. Sparks flared high into the night, showering the arena with light and shadow, and for a moment, the desert itself seemed alive with anticipation. Every breath Kale drew was measured, controlled, each step a decision weighted with danger. He felt the heat pressing against him, the sweat stinging his eyes, and yet he moved with the calm certainty of a warrior who had faced death before and had learned to see it as a teacher, not a threat. The crowd had grown restless. Murmurs spread, some of awe, others of fear. Many had never seen a challenger move with such precision, with such unyielding focus. Garrick Ironhand's eyes narrowed, a rare flicker of unease passing over his usually stern features. He had built the trial by fire to crush those who dared defy him, yet Kale Redhawk seemed immune to intimidation. Every leap, every dodge, every maneuver was a silent statement. He would not yield. Draven Stormclaw crouched at the edge of the arena, observing every motion. Every subtle shift in Kale's stance, every flicker of expression. His hands itched toward his blade, but he stayed back. Knowing this was Kale's battle, his moment to prove the strength of his spirit. The desert wind carried the smell of smoke, sand, and scorched leather, and Draven could feel the weight of history pressing down on them all. The Redhawks had faced impossible odds before, but this trial was unlike any that had come before. The black-cloaked figure was more than an observer. They were a force, a shadow woven into the challenge itself, and Cale would need every skill his father had taught him to endure what lay ahead. The black-cloaked figure moved again, faster this time, and Cale's instincts flared. They tossed another object into the fire-small, intricately carved box. It landed near the center of the arena, sparks immediately lashing at its edges. Cale's mind raced. The flames were a distraction, but the box held significance. He darted forward, rolling past a wall of fire and snatching it before the heat could damage it. Inside, he found a small piece of obsidian, etched with symbols he had seen only in whispers among the elders. They were marks of old Apache clans, symbols of resilience, courage, and hidden wisdom. His pulse quickened. This was no ordinary trial. The black-cloaked figure was testing not just his strength, but his understanding, his connection to his heritage, and his ability to decipher secrets hidden in plain sight. Leora Blackfeather's hands trembled as she watched from the cliff above. Her mind raced with worry and with insight. She had studied the history of their people, the stories buried in oral tradition, the warnings of older healers. The symbols Cale held were keys to understanding a threat that had lingered on the edges of the desert for generations. Force that preyed on courage, that twisted strength into despair. She knew that if Cale could unlock their meaning, he could survive the trial by fire, but if he misread them, the consequences could be fatal. Cale felt the heat intensify.
Ow.
Flames licked his legs, his arms, and the smoke burned his lungs, yet he moved with determination. Each leap was a calculation, each roll a lesson remembered from long nights of training under the stars with Ashen Red Hawk. He recalled the stories of Swift Eagle, a warrior who had defied impossible odds, surviving ambushes and starvation to lead his people to safety. Cale felt their courage flowing into him, a quiet strength beneath the roar of fire. The black-cloaked figure circled him now, keeping just out of reach, watching, testing, provoking. Cale tightened his grip on his dagger and the obsidian, sensing that the next challenge would come from confrontation, not fire. He moved toward the edge of the arena, keeping his eyes on the figure, aware that every step could trigger a new wave of danger. Sparks flew as the torches around him surged higher, casting shadows that twisted like living things across the sand. The desert seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Suddenly a sharp whistle pierced the night. From the edges of the crowd, men stepped forward, carrying weapons. But Cale recognized the subtle signals in their movements, coordination, timing, intent. They were part of the trial, extensions of Garrick Ironhand's design. Yet Cale understood that the black-cloaked figure had orchestrated this as well. The flames were one test, the crowd another, and the shadows of strategy yet another. His instincts screamed. He was no longer merely surviving fire. He was navigating a battlefield built of chaos, observation, and cunning. He leaped into action, striking with precision. Disarming one man before rolling past another, keeping the black-cloaked figure within his line of sight. Sparks flew around him, and for a moment he glimpsed the figure's eyes, sharp and calculating, reflecting both challenge and curiosity. Cale understood that this was more than a duel, it was a lesson, a confrontation meant to push him to the edge, to test whether his courage and insight were as strong as his skill. From the cliffs above, Leora's voice rose in a silent chant, the language of her ancestors, a spell of protection and clarity. Cale felt it in the air, a subtle guidance that steadied his steps. He realized then that the trial was not just about fire or the black-cloaked figure, it was about connection, about understanding the land, the people, and the spirit that guided them. Every leap, every dodge, every roll carried meaning beyond mere survival. The black-cloaked figure moved closer, finally stepping into the fire's edge. Cale could now see the sharp glint of a blade at their side. They circled him slowly, every movement measured. "You have courage," the figure's voice whispered, low and deliberate, carrying across the roar of the flames. "But courage alone will not be enough. You must see the truth that hides in shadow, or the fire will consume you entirely." Cale's heart raced, but his mind sharpened. He knew the figure was right. This trial was as much mental as it was physical, and the lessons of his ancestors were his only guide. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath the arena. A wave of sparks erupted as a section of the wooden platform caught fire in a sudden surge, sending men scattering, screams mingling with the roar of the flames. Cale leapt higher than before, landing precisely on a safe patch of sand. The intensity of the trial escalated beyond anything he had imagined. His pulse hammered, his muscles burned, yet he pressed forward. He could feel the eyes of the desert on him, the weight of history, the whispers of ancestors guiding his steps, urging him to endure, to survive, to rise. Draven Stormclaw's voice echoed in Cale's mind, a reminder and an anchor. Watch the shadows. Read the signs. Trust your instincts. The fire is only part of this. The real challenge lies in understanding the unseen. Cale moved again, darting through the flames, narrowly avoiding collapsing torches and falling beams. His grip on the obsidian tightened, the symbols burning in his mind, each one a key to the challenge he had yet to fully comprehend. The black-cloaked figure stopped suddenly, their eyes locking onto Cale's. Time seemed to slow. The fire around them surged, a wall of heat and light that seemed almost alive. Cale could hear the whisper of the desert wind carrying a message he could not yet interpret. And then, with a sudden motion, the figure disappeared into the shadows beyond the arena. Cale's heart leapt not with fear, but with anticipation. He knew that the climax of the trial was approaching, that the confrontation he had been sensing since the beginning was imminent. The crowd grew silent. Even Garrick Ironhand leaned forward, sensing the shift, the tension building to a peak no one could yet see. Cale's muscles coiled like springs, ready for whatever came next. The desert itself seemed to lean closer, the flames dancing higher, casting long shadows that twisted and moved like living predators. Every sense Cale possessed was alive, each instinct screaming that the moment he had been preparing for was near. From the cliffs, Leora's hands rose, her chant growing stronger. A thread of connection linking her to Cale. She could not fight the fire. Nor could she face the black-cloaked figure herself, but she could guide him in subtle ways, whispering courage through the wind, lending clarity to the chaos. Cale felt it, and his focus sharpened. He knew now that the trial had layers he had only begun to uncover, and that the real test, the confrontation, the revelation, the final crucible, was waiting just beyond the edge of the flames. Cale's eyes darted to the horizon, to the shadows that shifted beyond the fire, and for the first time he understood the true scope of the challenge. The trial by fire was more than endurance, more than courage. It was about insight, about understanding, about facing forces that sought to manipulate, to intimidate, to consume. And somewhere out there in the shadows, the black-cloaked figure was waiting. The final piece of the puzzle that would determine whether Cale Redhawk emerged triumphant or consumed. His pulse surged. His breath came in sharp bursts, every muscle coiled and ready. The desert wind whispered through the canyons, carrying the scent of smoke, sand, and anticipation. Cale knew that the next moments would define everything: the legacy of his family, the spirit of his people, the courage he had spent a lifetime cultivating. The fire had tested him, the shadows had tested him, and the figure in black had tested him. Now, the final confrontation was near, and Cale Redhawk was ready to meet it head-on, whatever it might demand. And in that charged stillness, as the flames roared and the desert held its breath, every eye in the arena fixed on Cale. The moment of truth, the moment where courage, wisdom, and instinct would collide, was almost upon them. The climax was near, yet the resolution remained just out of reach. Hidden in the fire and shadows, waiting for Cale Redhawk to step fully into his destiny. Cale Redhawk stood at the heart of the arena, the fire roaring around him. The black-cloaked figure now fully visible in the shadows beyond the flames. Their eyes glimmered with intent, yet there was no malice, only a challenge, a test, a recognition of the courage he carried in every fiber of his being. Cale tightened his grip on the obsidian in his hand, feeling the carvings beneath his fingers. A language older than the settlers, older than even the deserts themselves. The symbols had guided him, taught him, reminded him of who he was, and what he carried within: strength, honor, and the legacy of the Redhawks. The figure stepped forward, slow and deliberate, revealing the face beneath the hood. It was a woman, her eyes dark and piercing, her presence commanding yet calm. Cale's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from recognition. She was not an enemy, not truly, but a guardian of the trial, a keeper of secrets older than the fires around them. "Cale Redhawk," she said, voice steady, carrying across the crackling heat. "You have endured the flames, read the shadows, and followed the path of your ancestors. Few have come this far. Fewer still have understood the meaning hidden in what seems destructive." Cale nodded, breathing steady, feeling the weight of history and expectation around him. "I have learned," he replied, voice firm, though the fire pressed against him like a living thing. "Not from fear, but from the land, the desert, and those who came before me. I have listened, and I have understood." The woman inclined her head slightly, a gesture of respect. "Then you are ready to face the final lesson." She lifted her hand, and the flames shifted, moving like a river, forming a path through the arena. Cale saw that the fire no longer threatened him. It guided him, pointing toward the center where the last test awaited. Every spark, every ember, seemed to pulse with energy, resonating with the strength he had cultivated through trial and hardship. From the cliffs, Leora Blackfeather watched, heart pounding. She had feared this moment for weeks, yet now, seeing Cale move through the fire with purpose, with clarity, relief, and hope surged through her. She had seen the signs, the hidden messages in the obsidian, the patterns of the flames, and she knew that Cale had unlocked the lesson. True strength came not from brute force, but from understanding, from connection, from courage, tempered by wisdom. Draven Stormclaw's eyes never left Cale. The boy had grown before his eyes, tested by fire, shadow, and trial, and now he was poised on the edge of triumph. Draven felt pride surge through him, tempered by caution. "Stay aware, Cale," he murmured to himself. "The trial is nearly complete, but the heart must remain strong." Cale stepped forward, guided by the moving fire, each footfall deliberate, each breath measured. The arena had transformed. What had once been a place of danger now felt sacred, alive with the power of ancestors, of courage, and of lessons learned in the harsh desert nights. The black-cloaked figure stepped aside, allowing Cale to pass, their eyes conveying approval, a recognition that the boy had proven himself worthy. At the center of the arena lay a circle of stones, each etched with the symbols Cale had seen on the obsidian. He knelt, placing his hands upon the carvings, feeling the vibrations beneath his fingers, the stories embedded in the rock. He understood now if the trial had never been about fire alone. It had been about endurance of spirit, clarity of mind, courage in the face of danger, and connection to the wisdom of his people. The flames, the shadows, the challenges, they were all mirrors, reflections of what he carried within. The black-cloaked woman approached and placed her hand over his on the stones. "You have learned what many never will," she said softly. "Courage is not in avoiding fear or pain. It is in walking through them, with knowledge, with heart, and with honor." Cale lifted his gaze to hers, feeling the weight of her words. Feeling the fire of the trial settle into a quiet warmth within him. He understood that the trial had been not just a test of skill, but a rite of passage, a recognition of his place in the lineage of warriors who had come before him. The flames began to subside, retreating like a tide pulling back to reveal the desert beneath. The crowd erupted, not in fear, but in awe. Men and women who had witnessed the trial by fire felt the weight of what they had seen, the strength of spirit, the courage to face impossible odds, and the triumph of understanding over mere survival. Garrick Ironhand, usually stern and unyielding, allowed himself a rare nod of respect. Cale Redhawk had not only survived the trial but had transcended it, proving that courage guided by wisdom could overcome even the fiercest fire. Leora Blackfeather descended to the arena, her hands brushing Cale's shoulder. Relief washed over her, but so did pride. "You have done it," she whispered. "You have faced the flames, the shadows, and the trial itself. You have done what few could even imagine." Cale smiled, feeling the exhaustion in his body, but also the exhilaration of having endured, of having learned, of having emerged stronger than before. Draven Stormclaw approached, placing a hand on Cale's back. "You have proven your heart, Cale," he said. "The fire, the trial, the shadows, they are all gone now. What remains is the strength you carry within. Never forget it." Cale nodded, understanding that the lessons of the desert, of his ancestors, and of the trial would stay with him forever. The black-cloaked woman stepped back, her purpose complete. "Go," she said. "Carry what you have learned. Protect those who cannot protect themselves." Lead with courage, with honor, and with heart. You are no longer a boy tested by fire. You are a warrior who has earned his place among the legends of your people." She turned, stepping into the shadows, disappearing as mysteriously as she had arrived. Cale watched her go, feeling the weight of her message and the promise it carried. The arena was silent for a moment, the desert holding its breath as if acknowledging the conclusion of an age-old test. Then slowly applause rose, mingled with shouts of amazement. Cale's gaze swept over the crowd, seeing faces filled with awe, respect, and a quiet understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. He felt the desert around him, the wind through the canyons, the whisper of ancestors, and knew that the trial by fire had changed him in ways deeper than any flame could touch. Cale looked to Leora, and their eyes met. There was no need for words. She understood, as he did, that this was more than survival. It was a beginning, a recognition of purpose, and a reaffirmation of the strength of spirit that the Apache had carried for generations. Together, they stepped from the arena, leaving the charred remnants of the trial behind, walking toward the cliffs, toward the land that had shaped them, toward the future they would face together. Draven Stormclaw followed, a quiet smile on his face. "The desert has many more lessons to teach," he said, voice steady. "But for tonight, Cale Redhawk, you have shown what it means to endure, to learn, and to lead. The fire has passed, and you are ready for all that lies ahead." Cale nodded, feeling the truth in his mentor's words, feeling the weight of responsibility and the exhilaration of triumph. The sun rose over the horizon the next morning, casting light across the desert, illuminating the canyons, the mesas, and the riverbeds that had witnessed the trial. The wind carried the scent of smoke and sand, but also of renewal of promise, and of the enduring strength of those who dared to walk through fire and emerge stronger. Cale Redhawk stood at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the land, the embers of the trial still smoldering below. He felt the fire within him settle into a quiet warmth, a flame that would never fade. Leora joined him, her hand finding his. "The trial is over," she said softly, "but the journey continues." Cale smiled, feeling the weight of the past, the lessons learned, and the promise of what lay ahead. "Yes," he said, voice steady, "but we face it together, and with the strength of all who came before us." The desert stretched out before them, vast, harsh, yet beautiful. The flames of the trial were gone, but the lessons, the courage, and the wisdom remained. Cale Redhawk had faced the fire, defied the torches, and emerged not only unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and ready to protect the land and people he loved. The black-cloaked figure was gone, the challenge complete. Yet the memory of the trial would remain, a testament to endurance, spirit, and courage. As Cale, Leora, and Draven descended toward the river, the first birds of dawn took flight, and the wind carried the whispers of the desert stories of courage, of trials faced, and of warriors who had walked through fire and emerged victorious. Cale knew that the journey was far from over, but for now, the flames had passed, and the horizon was bright with promise. The trial had ended, but the legend of Cale Redhawk the Apache, who defied the torches, was just beginning.